Welcome to Timber&Terra. I'm Glenn. Today's video I think is going to be all about rocks. And not these rocks initially. This area is new. I'll explain that when we get to it. But for now, I'm actually going to go to the end of the road where it meets the town road. There's a section of ditch that I was trying to avoid having to make that I don't think I can avoid it any longer. So I'm going to go down, make a ditch there, line that with rocks. I'll explain this when we come here to fill this with rocks, as well as line it with some fabric. So you can see here the rest of this road. It's basically all done there. The rough grading is done. I still have some fine work to do. May let it grow up to grass before I do the fine work, I'm not sure. The gravel ends right there, so I still have probably another 2, 4, 6, probably 8 loads of gravel left to finish coating this clay-based road. So this area, my initial plan was just to bring the lawn, the grass, the mowable field sort of right up to the edge of the road and sort of make a swale for the water to drain. But the last couple heavier storms that I've observed, there you can see, it causes quite a bit of a washout. So my concern is that I would never be able to maintain grass here. If I had a nice grass edge, it would eventually wash out. So sort of my plan was here. I figured sort of at the end, I'm going to have a lot of water and I'd have a sort of a rock collection. So what I've decided, basically from where the excavator bucket is all the way down here, I'm going to make a somewhat narrow ditch, not nearly as big as that. I'll fill it with smaller rocks. So for the most part, I don't have a lot of work to do. The ditch is sort of already defined for me. This stuff here, a little bit of topsoil along the edge of the road where the grass is growing, I'm going to get rid of that. And then maybe go back here, 2 or 3 feet from the edge of the road and remove this topsoil. I will line it with landscape fabric, which is sort of that felt-like stuff. It's non-woven, which I have a roll of it. I think it's either 4 or 5 feet wide, so hopefully that works well for the size of the ditch. And then I have a lot of stone walls around my property, plenty of source of rocks. I just have to expend the time and effort to get them. So that's going to be most of what this is about. It's not going to take long to ditch this out and line it, but it's going to take a while to collect and place all the rocks. So here with the tie-in, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't creating a dam, like stopping short of this, so that the water runs here and then sort of fills up and then overflows. So I wanted to get down basically to the same level I had before, and when I start digging up fabric, I know I'm there. So a little bit of shovel work here to clean this up and make a decent transition. The other thing to note is it would have been easier with a smooth face bucket. I do have an attachment I made where I take all the teeth off and replace it with sort of teeth that mount onto a straight blade across here. I've done ditches with that before. It does make for easier, neater work for exactly this type, because now I have a lot of loose dirt here. And I'm trying to pick up the edges, you know, a lot falls between the teeth. But for this little small job, it wasn't worth the time to put that on. It would be nice to have a ditching bucket, you know, the wide, smooth edge bucket that's made for this kind of work, but I just don't have that. So maybe you're wondering why I wear this funny hat. Occasionally I like to wear this hat when it's really sunny out or hot. It protects my ears, so I don't have to worry about sunburn or putting sunscreen lotion on. It does a little bit for my eyes, not as much as a ball cap, but the other thing is the deer flies, which tend to congregate towards the top of anyone's head, whether it be animals or humans. So with this, it seems as though they don't bite my head nearly as much. If they do go underneath my brim, I can hear them, rather than sort of biting me silently in the back of the head like with a ball cap. So I'm not trying to portray any particular look, it's really functionality. So it is time for rocks, but before we mess with rocks, my dump trailer needs a little love. This one here is just from regular use. I'll just scab a piece of plywood on. At some point I'll need to replace these. But this side is what I need to address. This here, as well as this, was caused when I was pushing this with a bulldozer. I got it stuck. Recently, I did not video that, although I did video myself getting stuck last year, so if you really want to see what that looks like, you can see that. Last year, though, I didn't damage it. I was able to run the blade across here, and it sort of spread out the force, but here, the angle was a bit weird, and I just wasn't able to get it right, and I ended up sort of cutting this. This is not a big concern. I may try to pull this out now, but I'm not too concerned about that. I did a thing here when I was hauling some big rocks. The big rocks caused this to fold over, and this sort of folded, so I had to cut it, bring it back, and then weld it. But this is really the thing that I need to fix now, because this is where the tailgate mounts, which is that thing there. And so I need to bring it back this way. I'll fix this. This is the pocket where the sideboards go on. And a little bit this way I need to go. Because right now that it's pretty loose up here. It might even fit between these hinge points, but I want to straighten this up a bit that way. So, and that's why I have my my tool. I don't know if I'm going to be able to bend this as is with the excavator, or what I might end up doing is cutting a notch or breaking, cutting at least a side here or there, so I can bend it back easier and then re-weld it. That if I have difficulty bending it as it is, that would be a quicker fix than trying to heat it up or do something with more force to bend it without cutting it. You know, welding that back is not going to take too long. Well, that's not going to do it. I had my tractor brakes locked and it was skidding the tractor. So it's relatively up and down vertical on this side. It might be slightly bent in compared to sort of eyeballing it with the other side, but it's good enough. So now I just need to bend it just a little bit to the left. Well, it may not have moved it much, but I think it's good enough. What I'm going to do now is I'll just straighten up these, straighten that up, and then make sure I can fit the tailgate in, which I'm pretty sure it will, because you saw there's quite a bit of play in here. And then if that fits well, then I'll weld this up, weld this back, and then I'll probably reuse this until it absolutely fails. You can see some other repairs. All this does is just hold the top of the pile in. Not a lot of force on it. They've been beat up, so. So with the tailgate fitting good, now I'll turn my attention back to fixing up this, getting the welder up, welding that back, and welding this piece back, and making sure the sideboards fit. So I put this on here just as sort of a strong back so I could bend that out without bending this one out. I'll probably, before I put the sideboards in, spray some oil in these pockets as well, because there is a bit of rust, particularly now that I've burnt off the paint down there. Put in these sideboards, assuming they will stay in and hold material. That's all that matters, and we'll be good to go. So there's a bit of a gap there. These are nylock nuts, so you can leave them so the bolt's not tight, but this will not come off. The whole thing will spin. So this is a latch for the tailgate. Basically shuts it. Stuck a little bit always on this side anyhow, which is fine. But that tailgate latch is operated by this. So now the tailgate's latched right there. And I do tailgate spread when I do gravel. I actually, in my woods road, I've actually done it quite a bit. I've not tried it with my clay as much, because I put clay more recently on some of my woods roads to flatten them up and to bring the level up above where water might be. But I need the tailgate on for gravel and for the project today, which is rocks. And then to operate the tailgate, I have this rope. Just hang on to here or anywhere. One thing I need, I've ripped it more than once, because depending on where I hook it when I dump it, sometimes the distance between here and where it hooks will exceed the distance of my rope, and it'll just break. Yeah, so these are in need of replacement at some point. These have been on it since I've owned the trailer. I don't know how many hundreds of yards of stuff I'd hauled, but they've done me well, even though they look beat up. I know some of you may say this is a hack job, which it is, but if the hack job did not serve the purpose I was looking for, then I would have redone it until the hack job was good enough. Orange I use just because it's the closest thing to red that I happen to have, and it's just for rust protection, really. Obviously not looking for looks. All right, now let's go get some rocks. So we've arrived, obviously not too far away from the homestead back there. This is not the primary area I had planned to get my rocks from. It's actually over there, where if you've watched previous videos, you've seen me work before, making a hole through the stone wall. I know there's a bunch of rocks in here. This is also a stone wall. This is the area that I cut a bunch of popple or quaking aspen trees. You can see some smaller ones growing up here among the fir. And I use my rake, my grapple rake there. So there's a bunch of rocks here, but there's also mixed in with a bunch of sticks and twigs and stems and branches and treetops. So I thought I'd just poke around here. If it looks easy enough to gather some of these rocks, then I'll grab them. I'll work my way down there. I'm guessing it's going to be a bit more of a pain than I want to spend today, as far as time-wise, to get the rocks that I want. Also, that stone wall continues over there. So I'll play around here. If it proves a little bit too time-consuming, then I'll move over there where I know I have a lot of access to rocks pretty quickly. So making progress. Is actually quite a bit more wet than I would have liked. To handpick these, it's really slippery and muddy. But this red maple, which I had sort of wanted to save because it was a nice tree, nice straight trunk. It had other trees growing next to it, which is why the crown is sort of flat on this side. But I've ruined so much of the roots here, and I'm not really concerned about the red maple. I don't want to take away any of the firs. That's really my primary objective here in this area, is to let these firs grow so I can control, you know, from, which would be my retirement field, what I see of foam poles, houses, other stuff versus the mountains. So I don't really need these hardwood trees here. So I'm going to just take that down and get it out of the way, and then just keep moving that way. So as I've gotten further into the rock wall, it's become a lot easier to pick out the rocks, a lot drier. You can see it's muddy down there. Those rocks that are covered with mud, I'm just going to leave because that's sort of the lay of the land anyhow. Because I want this relatively flat, easy transition from the field to the left and to the field to the right. So the other pile over here, I've separated what I call the medium rocks, which I will probably use in that area next to the big rock that we showed at the very beginning of this video. I have larger rocks on the property that are part of some other stone walls. I don't think there are many big ones here that are just big ones that I don't have an immediate use for. So I'll separate those out. So basically what I'm putting in the trailer here are just the ones that I can handle by hand, so I can place in that ditch. Well, I'm guessing from the edge of the road where I started to there's probably 25 feet. And I finally have a full trailer load of rocks, which is about 4 maybe 5 yards. A bunch of medium-sized rocks. And then there's still, hopefully the yield is a bit better here. Most of these are pretty mud soaked. Does look a little bit better. Some stumps in the way. As long as they're not near the fir trees, I'll take the stumps out. But like there was one over there was taken out, but there's one closer to that. I think it's an elm that I took down close to that fir that I'm not gonna, because I'll disturb the roots. I already had to sacrifice the red maple. Okay, well, slow going. That was filled with sort of a combination of all that you saw, some hand picking, some direct loading, either rock by rock or bucketfuls. You know, if I didn't have a lot of dirt and crap in it, and I was just able to load a portion of a bucket full of rocks. All right, so let's empty these guys and get our ditch started. So that's the first load done. That went relatively well. It would have gone a lot better if it wasn't 80 degrees and about a 70-degree dew point, which is very hot and humid, at least for our area. So it looks like I did do about half of it. That last section of the ditch is just a little bit deeper, so it'll probably take a bit more rocks. So rather than dump out everything like I did here, I think I'm just going to dump a little bit out and just see how we go. If I have any left over, then I may just dump them at the very end there, because that section that already has rocks in it, I want to fill up a bit more. So my objective here is on this side to have the rocks below the mower blade so I can mow over here and not hit rocks. On this side, have the rocks low enough so I don't hit them with the snowplow. So there still may be some, you know, moving some rocks around. Ideally, this ditch is really not quite wide enough, but I'd like, you know, the rocks to have a little bit of a swale as well. This ditch, it seems though there's enough flow to wash out just dirt, but not enough flow where it's really going to sort of flood this like the ditch in front of my house, the road ditch, does with the same sort of rock treatment I have. For the most part, the water will run through the rocks, but I hope that the rocks are low enough so that if it does, the water level does come up here, it's not going to flood over the road. But we'll see. The proof will be in the pudding when we get some significant rain and I can see what happens. So a couple notes about this. One is obviously these dirty rocks are going to clean up just like these other ones. Those other ones were just as dirty like that when I put those in. So it'll take several rainstorms, maybe a little bit of runoff. The older section had sort of started to fill in with silt. You can see that. So probably a third of the depth of my original rock ditch was filled in with silt. But it was quite deep, so I'm not concerned about it sucking up too much capacity. So as you might have noticed, to put the big rocks first in the center and then sort of work from from big to smaller, smaller and smaller, with the smallest ones being on the edge. A couple reasons. One is with the smaller ones it's easier to keep the edge below the surfaces that I want. Having the big ones in the middle creates larger channels. If there were a bunch of small ones in the center, then those would tend to clog up the channels that the water can run through, which would force the water level to rise and ride over the rocks rather than through them more often. It still will ride over the rocks, obviously with heavy runoff. The other thing I want to do, and I still may have to work on this a bit, which is obviously the ditch has quite a U-shape to it, but even the top of the rocks I want to have a slight U-shape because during a heavy rain the water will rise above the rocks and flow, and I don't want that to cause the water to spill off into the driveway. So I can see here there are some areas where I'll probably remove some of the smaller rocks in the center to make sure I have those channels. And to try to create that little bit of a channel on top of the rocks. So I had options compared to what I did. Obviously I picked rocks from existing rock walls and I hand placed them here. I had other options. I could have purchased riprap or gabion stone, which is sort of stone, say 6 to 8 inches up to 12 inches, is what we typically find in ditches for a quarry product. But I like the look of the natural field stone much better than the crushed stone. The other thing is I can purchase tailings, which would be just like this, field stones that come from a gravel pit where they make either screen gravel. There's two screen locally where I'd get the tailings. They make 3-inch screen gravel and 1.5 inch screen gravel. So you'd get the rocks that don't fit through those screens. They're called tailings. I've done that before. I've purchased those for this purpose here. They're pricey. It's about $2.50 a load, but this was probably only about a half, 3/4 of a truckload. So cost-wise, compared to my labor, it would be cheaper. It would be quicker. Still, I would probably do a lot of handwork placing them in because it's going to be the same mix of sizes, and I'd still want to put the big ones in the center. But one is the rock wall that I'm working on, I actually want to remove because I'd like to have a sort of a continuous surface from one field to the other. I may not mow between it because I am letting trees grow up, but at least so you can walk, and if we choose to mow between the trees, we have that option. Right now with the rocks in the way, we don't. And I don't really mind doing that. So for all those reasons, I've chosen the hard way to make this rock line ditch rather than purchase stuff and do it an easy way. But let's move to the other area. I'll show you, it's not going to be on this video, but I'll show you that area where it will be sort of mechanized. I'm not going to do any hand placing there. It's just too big of an area, and it's a place for me to use larger rocks that I cannot handle by hand. This area is a bit different. It's not a ditch, at least up here. So I'm not too concerned about having that sort of a swale on top of the rocks. This area I dug out, it was very soupy. You can tell there's even standing water there still. And for consideration of mowing, how am I gonna mow these around here, mow these areas? So I decided this is going to be too wet to mow most of the time. So my plan here is to cover this dirt with road fabric, just like that black fabric is. It's a woven type, not like the fabric we use for the ditch, because I have a lot of extra of this a lot of sort of second use that I've used in my garden that I don't have a good use for. It's a perfect application for it. So I'm going to make it just level. So what I'd like to be able to do is, if I'm mowing, say with a flail mower, is just mow here and just drive right across the rocks and start mowing on the other side. So here I'm going to dump everything with my trailer. Just have to figure out how to get here and dump it without getting stuck. It's actually starting to dry out nicely. The other reason this is going to work well is because it allows the adjacent areas to dry out, because sort of the water level has been reduced a bit lower. So figure out how I can dump it here and then use my bulldozer just to sort of track over it and level it, and then you know, sort of force the stones into place so it's relatively level, so I can drive across it with a tractor. Alright, so before we leave for this video, I just want to show you the area that I took 2 loads out of, that stone wall, and the pile of rocks that will go in this area here. So back here to the source of those rocks, I've probably got maybe 50 feet, 40, 50 feet of this rock wall, or sort of rock dumping area done. So it was interesting. There are several pockets like here where there's a lot of smaller rocks and relatively dry soil with just some loose roots around it, and then there was more of this stuff here which was buried a bit deeper, which was muddy, and a lot of the bigger ones were on bottom. Ran across a lot of these too. Those farmers, I don't know how they got their work done. So this probably represents a quarter of the total distance between here and the property line, which is what I'd like to eventually do. This small stand of aspen on my property, but the property line basically is the tree line that goes from the left there and to the right over there. So I'm happy with this. I'll save the firs. I'll probably take this brush, which is off to the side, to the left and to the right here, and some roots. There were some sizable trees. I took the root balls out. Probably set the brush aside and just sort of grade out this area as best I can between the trees. I re-established my ditch here because there is a fair amount of drainage that comes from part of this field into there, and there's a small culvert under my road there that goes to the left and drains out that way. So we did end up with a couple significant piles of what I call medium-sized rocks that will go in that area that we just looked at, sort of that drainage area. And then a couple rocks like here. There's probably some mixed in there that are even too big for that area that I'll set aside. I'm sure I will have some use at some point for the bigger rocks, but for now I'll just sort of set them aside somewhere, stockpile them for future use. But for now, that's it. Stay tuned for more rock work with bigger rocks, more machinery, less hands. Next time we do some filling of rocks into drainage areas. I appreciate you sticking along for this one. Thanks.